Hello and welcome. We are live from right in front of a studio audience, is what Jeremy just told me. Um, Whoop, this is the wrong one. Hello, we're over here. We're not in the college show today. Welcome to the Have You Played This podcast. We are back. We were alive. Oh, right. I never figured out why there's no desktop audio on this one. Let me just do that real quick. Audio output capture. Okay. Device. Focusrite USB audio. Okay, Jeremy, talk.
I'm speaking. It's
Thank
me.
God.
I'm Jeremy Gage.
You're here. We're alive. This is the Have You Played This podcast. I am one of your hosts, Adam Bell. You can find me on Twitter at AdamEBell. Or go to adamebell.games to buy any of my games. Jeremy, introduce yourself.
Hi,
Come
I'm
on.
Jeremy Gage. You can find me at Jeremy Gage 5 over on Twitter. Listen to the Draw Your Dice podcast, a show where I interview game designers like Adam and many of the call-in guests on this show about their insights and philosophies, so that you too can make your own game, learn some stuff.
Hey, have you
It's
thought about making
educational.
games? Anybody out
I
there?
have. I'm making a game. Yeah, it's a surprise. I didn't. I just started.
Yeah? We haven't talked
Yeah.
about this.
Not at all. Uh, yeah, it's going well. I'm playing a lot of Destiny 2. Uh, Found out that I could play it on my Mac on Stadia, so that's pretty cool. And I'm having a rippin' ball.
Stadia.
Stadia.
That's a
I
name I haven't heard in a long time.
I know. Thank you. I'm glad some. I've told like 5 people, and like, what the fuck is Stadia? I'm
What are you
like,
talking
there were
about?
so many commercials. There's
Oh,
so
well.
many commercials in 2020.
I don't believe I've seen a commercial, but I do remember it being announced and then left behind, essentially.
Yeah, didn't have the tech. It's good. It's pretty good. I really like that it doesn't require like any specs for my computer to run. I really enjoy that Destiny 2 is like a cross-platform game. So if I do happen to get like a PS5 or something in the future, uh, then I can just easily upload my account to that and still be at the same spot I was, which is really, really good.
You know, the future didn't bring us much, but it did bring us cross platform save files.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
But but it's for anyone who hasn't played Destiny, they're dungeons. So Destiny 2 is a looter shooter, space gladiator sort of thing. If you've seen or played Halo, it plays very similar in the way to Halo, on top of like some RPG elements.
Yeah. Yeah, I just love the
And
initial idea before you brought the Halo thing in. The idea of just imagining a guy, he's out there. He's never heard of Destiny, but he knows what the words looter shooter means. But Halo, he probably knows Halo. That's fine.
yeah, looter shooter is self-explanatory.
Is it?
Uh,
If you
yes.
are deep in to games and thus already know about Destiny. What do you mean looter? Like you're breaking
But
store windows? Sorry, go ahead.
oh God, dude, you said it, and now you've brought them all to.
They're
I can
watching
see them
now.
apparating into the studio audience chairs as we speak.
I'm watching it. Yeah. Sorry. I'll handle this.
Uh, but I'm really inspired by how the strikes feel. The strikes are their like tiny dungeons. Essentially, they take about 8 to 10 minutes to do. You form a party of 3. You go in, you have like some objectives to fulfill as you like crawl through the dungeon, and then you have a boss at the end, and some mini bosses throughout the way. And that's really fascinating. And I'm also really inspired by Destiny 2 raids as well, and like doing doing the thing that I think is always hard to execute in Dungeons and Dragons, which is like the puzzle boss fight, because often you can sort of just kill the boss and ignore the puzzle depending on the GM style.
Mhm.
Um, I really find it. So, for instance, I don't want to say anything about that. I don't want to do any spoilers because the expansion I'm playing is the latest one in case someone's playing and hasn't done the campaign. But there is a strike that I have done called arms dealer, and the boss is Brachus Zahn, who's a sniper, big bulky sniper dude.
Mm.
The gimmick to the encounter is that at certain HP intervals he'll jump to these very high towers,
Uh-huh.
where he'll snipe you from, and you can do like a little bit of damage while he's up there. But after a certain point, he'll shoot a flare in the air, summon a bunch of ads and enemies, and then a dome barrier will encase him. He can still fire out of it, but you can't do any damage to him. So in order to break the tower, you're on top of like this big energy factory, and at some point what's called a solar charge will spawn. You have to go to one end of the base, pick up the solar charge, run it down the field like a football player, and then spike it into a generator so that it causes the tower to blow up, and then you can't use that tower anymore. So you do
Mm.
that about 2 times.
It's the
I think it's very dynamic.
Walk me through the spike animation, because that's the shit that Destiny's always good at. In my limited experience with it, yeah, nice and chunky.
It's chunky. It feels good, dude. I won't lie.
Yeah. Yeah, I played very limited amounts of Destiny 1 before any expansions came out. So when it was a big hunk of shit, uh, and nobody liked
Loot
it.
Cave.
And Peter, well, it was post Loot Cave, pre anything else. It was just like no fun was to be had. Only Peter Dinklage's stunted voice acting. That's the only thing I have. But a lot of the shooting obviously felt really good, and that's how it survived, is because it was just nice to go in and shoot at people's heads, aliens' heads, so it's fine.
Definitely different.
It's different. You know, they're called the Hive. Like, come on. But all
I've
of like
never heard them.
the shooting and the animations and all that was just fun. Feels good. It's nice
Yeah.
when video games, especially ones with huge budgets like that, actually spend those budgets on making just every little thing feel good.
Mm-hmm.
It's important.
And it really is the little things. Like, I think Destiny 2, for an MMORPG, looter shooter, whatever the fuck genre it is, I think it has some of the best emotes I've seen in any game. They have so many like dances and just really funny emotes that you can do while you're waiting for shit to happen in a dungeon.
You heard about this game, Fortnite?
I think that a lot of Fortnite's emotes are cringe, so I think it's just before, because they're so like pop culture-y.
Yeah, I was gonna say, which ones are cringe? The ones that they just steal from content creators on the internet and don't pay them for, or other ones?
And I think Destiny fits within like that. If there's a spectrum between an emote that is like game central and then an emote that is like pop culture central, Destiny is like off center towards the pop culture side, but not in a way that it feels like stolen or cringy or like a bunch of older developers were like, this is fun. The kids love this. It's more like they thought, this is a cool dance and we want it in here.
I want to see the Destiny man floss.
I think it's true. I think it's in there.
Good. That's all I need. Now I'll play it. I've been playing. If we want to talk about video games, I've been playing Elden Ring.
Mm-hmm.
You know this.
How's that?
You watched me start it. It's good. Speaking of
I
games
heckled
that
the shit out of you.
yeah, I restarted since then, and I am no longer the whatever guy I picked.
So you're the vagabond.
No, I'm a confessor.
Heard.
I wanted a better. I didn't want. Ooh, I'll get to it. Speaking of game, it's like all of From Software's games that I've played, which is Bloodborne, a little bit of Dark Souls, and probably half of Sekiro. Sekiro's fucking hard.
Because you died twice.
Yeah, so they use that as an excuse to just really amp it up. It's good. It's really good. The first half, at least, is super good. But yeah, all of those games, everything about it feels good to do. Like, just walking your man around is nice. Swinging the sword is nice. Getting the little stance breaking, that feels nice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder, in the tabletop RPG sense, what feels nice to do. How do we make RPGs that feel nice to play?
I think this is me. If anyone hasn't read the article, I think it's really interesting. There is an MDA article about I think it's called the 8 types of fun.
Mm.
And obviously, grain of salt. I don't think it's super easy to put everyone into a single bucket. Maybe it's like a combination of a couple things. Oh, also, good morning to Jimmy Shelter and to Will Yopes on the chat, because Will's just hitting us with the screen shake. And if we can figure out how to do screen shake in real life, that would be nice for tabletop RPGs. You know what? Here's what it would be.
GM
It's
just
like
starts
one of those.
whipping the table around.
Yeah, it's one of those it's like one of those party game things where you pull a prompt card and it's like shake the person next to you if they score 10 points this round. Just like reach over and shoulder shake them. Ooh, dice that vibrate. I've actually seen there was this, I think it was a Kickstarter,
Probably an Indiegogo,
but
if it's gonna be one of these weird dice.
no, it
tech.
was not Indiegogo. It was definitely Kickstarter. But it was a dice that had no sides on it. Everything was LED. So like you would roll this like round dice, and when it showed a particular side, it would light up and like vibrate if you got like a 20 or a 1 or something like that. So that was really interesting. I'm sure you could program it, since it's electronic, to do exactly what Victifun, who, hello, thank you for joining us, said that dice should vibrate on a fail roll.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm a dice Luddite. I don't want any of these fancy dice. The only fancy dice, actually, I take it back. The only fancy dice that I would like is if I were to see a long future for me where I'm going to be playing in Roll20. I would like real dice that just pop up into the Roll20 chat whenever I roll them. That's all I want. Very simple. Let's keep that easy. You could probably do that with like a Wiimote.
Yeah. Whoa. Whoa.
Probably
Technology's
not a Wiimote,
being
but
birthed.
when you think about, I don't know if you've ever seen, you can make like a digital whiteboard with 2 Wiimotes. That's what that joke was. Because the Wiimotes will track like where your hands are going.
Wink.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Hey.
Everyone knows what we're saying. Hello, Ice Cold Brew. Thank you for joining us today.
But yeah, what feels good? I think like in D&D, obviously rolling the 20 feels good, right? When you roll a 20, you're like, oh yeah. A little sound effect goes off in your head.
Yeah.
The rest of that game, not really, but
yeah, definitely like critical things or like playing the odds. But in the 8 types of fun, this is for me specifically. So I think, first of all, game feel is going to be different for what type of fun someone enjoys. I think that's one of the keys of a game design.
But shooting the man in Destiny is universally fun.
No, it's not. Some people, Grace doesn't like violence in games or like depictions of them. So it's actually like anti-fun for her.
That's not necessarily a type of anybody that would enjoy that type of game. It's universally fun, I guess, is what I mean. So anybody into a shooter,
person that would enjoy that game, it is now universally fun.
For everybody in the world that would enjoy playing a first-person shooter, the way that shooting the man's head in Destiny is fucking perfect. It's universally fun. So what?
You drop universal. You don't.
I'm not gonna drop it. It's a fact. It's there.
Universally
you can't say the
fun.
same for like Borderlands. Shooting the guy, it's fine.
But I was gonna say it's about like trying to. I think when I discovered this article in combination with another resource called Quantic Foundry, which is a company that has recently shifted into selling their tools. Before they were doing it for free. They're still doing it free. You can take like a survey to find out like
what kind of gamer
spectrum.
You are.
Yeah, what kind of gamer you are, both for video games and for board games. Recently they moved to like companies are like, hey, if you want to have like someone who's already done market research on 400,000 different gamers, here you go. Like, here's the results that we have. But you can do a personal survey for free. But for me, one of the things that I've recently discovered is that I am someone who loves challenge in games. Like I love to be tested mentally. That's
Hmm.
why I love games like Root. That's why I love games like the Dark Souls games, because I feel like they're challenging in like a strategic kind of way. It's why I love Mario Party style games or fighting games, because there's just so many variables, especially when you play in like a competitive format. But my skill also has to match being able to play those games. Like I'll never PvP in Destiny. I am fucking bad. I'm really bad at
You gotta
Destiny.
get yourself into that Crucible. Come on,
No, I'm very bad.
it's
The
fun.
AI fucking dick me around all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let yourself get. I'm sure there's ranked. Let yourself get shunted down into bronze. You can
I'm
play
all
with
right.
all the other losers.
I did it in League of Legends. I'm okay.
Well, yeah, but
I'm
League
okay.
is horrible. League is universally unfun.
You, you never. We're just whipping around the U word today.
That's
Um,
right. That's what I'm here to talk
but
about.
the universal
What is
aspects.
universally fun? It feels good.
So uh, I I think it's about like looking. So for Umbral Dive, for example, I have decided that I want to um, help create an immersive place for storytelling, which satisfies like a personality trait as of Quantic Foundry of immersion and storytelling and like character creation. And I also want to satisfy like the challenging aspect of it, which is like combat and tactical things. But I'm not interested in like I'm not interested in nailing all of the fun types. So submission is another example and something I do not enjoy. Submission would be games like Candy Crush is an example of a submission game where you can just sort of like burn time on a low energy activity. Also interesting is that I was listening to the reason I found this article is I was listening to a talk with, I don't know if it's Jeff Finkelstein or not, but it was on the Panelcast RPG Panelcast podcast, and the guy talked about there isn't really like he hasn't really found a submission tabletop RPG yet, and he thinks that if someone can find the formula to that, they have like it's a gold rush situation.
God. Jerry, this is a fun. I like when you talk about this stuff because it is so outside of anything that I would ever honestly want to think about in game design. It's and so it's like really interesting for me to hear about like trying to target. I don't know. Because we've talked about I think this. Well, I guess you've talked about these types of play before, and like I don't like the joy to for me the fun in trying to make a game is not in like academically dissecting what makes it fun, but by going off of some sort of gut feel. So it's just very funny to me that whatever I ask, what's something that universally feels good, you start, breaking it into this like very, very thought forward. I don't want to say academic because like obviously we're not in college, but it is. I mean, it's that line of thinking of like trying
I'm
to,
a man of science, Adam.
yeah, yeah, with all of the not all of the baggage. Come on, but all of the ups and downs
Some of the
of that.
baggage.
Yeah, there's a lot. Look, science has a lot of baggage to account for it. I'm not saying that you're bringing all that.
Science is a religion, dude.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I put a link in the Twitch chat if anyone wants to look at what the 8 types are. Um, for our podcast viewers, I'm sure we can figure out how to put that
I'm
link
sure
in
you
the
could Google 8 types of
Jubilee.
fun and it'll show right up. Right? I mean, we can get that in the links.
No, you definitely have to like type in like MDA types of fun, because if you just type in types of fun, you're gonna get what's happening in your local city.
The 8 types of fun: sensation, fantasy, narrative, challenge, fellowship, discovery, expression, submission.
You found it.
I did. And then Mark LeBlanc next one. Yeah, it's
Mock.
it's interesting because I don't outside of talking about this on like with anybody that would want to talk about it. I don't think I would ever want to care about this. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to say that like dismissively, because I do
Hmm.
definitely like talking about it. And I want to hear what you find is going to be universally pleasing using this framework. So let's go. Let's
Universally.
keep it. Let's keep it going.
I don't think that's what I'm saying. I don't think there's any like concept of universal fun.
I
I
don't think
think
that's
that
true
I think it's so okay,
because again,
here's what
we
I will
do
say.
our we are.
I think one piece that is potentially
Mhm.
universally fun is uh shared experience of a game, and I think that's applicable to almost maybe any game. So I don't mean like shared experience for a single game. I mean shared experience in that you find people who have played the types of game that you play or have played the same game as you, the same obscure game. Like, I get I partially get excited when I mention some obscure game and someone on the mainstream end is like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that. I was interested." And I was like, "Wow, you heard of fucking Dice Thrones? Great, super cool." Um, and then we get to chatting about that. So I do think one universal fun is like the conversation of game, and I don't mean like conversation in terms of like progressiveness, but just like chatting about games you like, and
Mhm.
then finding that you like similar games, and that in of itself is fun.
I mean, that's why people do podcasts. Hey.
Please subscribe and donate. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so if you can't find a universal fund using this framework, I think that means for now it's time to throw out the framework, and we gotta figure out what in tabletop RPGs could feel as good for everybody, of course, and don't take everybody literally. It doesn't have to be everybody, but it's gonna be everybody that's gonna play. What would feel as good as swinging the sword in Elden Ring and breaking the stance and hearing that sound effect that you get in all the Souls games whenever they're open for a critical, or shooting the man in Destiny, or I'm trying to think of what else. Honestly, hopping over a piece in checkers, that's just nice.
Yeah, feels
Actually, no,
good.
the hopping over more than one piece, I think is what I would say in checkers.
I think well, here's the thing, which is interesting about what you said, and Fictive Fun has mentioned social feedback is really big for them as a gamer as well. But the word feedback is really interesting to me, and I think it's about like when we talk about like what's universally fun, what provides like very positive feedback, right? Shooting the guy and getting a headshot is like strong feedback. Like that's a culmination of your skill, the sound effects and the visuals that are happening.
Sound effects are
Um,
always so good. That's why it's so hard.
yeah.
It's such a hard question.
It and for Dark Souls, it's feedback of overcoming a hard enemy, right? I think for me, something that is universally fun is skill. And I know you could say that like not every game requires skill in some ways, but I don't want to say argue. I would say that
You
like
should
even like in
just
a
argue.
I'm imagining
Go for it.
no, I'm not arguing.
Just go
I don't
for
want to. That's not how conversation.
it.
Uh,
What?
but I think about solo RPGs, right? And you could say like, oh, there's no skill in like a solo journaling RPG, and I would disagree.
Who's
I would
saying that?
disagree, and I'm just
I'm coming
someone could
for them.
say that,
I'm
right?
gonna go argue with them, but keep
But
going.
I think there is creative skill,
Yeah.
right? I think because for me, I lack a solo creative skill.
Hmm.
When I've tried to play solo RPGs that are like more journal directed, um, I find myself hitting like a writer's block wall
Mm.
all the time, like very quickly into the process. So I think that a universally fun mechanic is feedback. in the sense that there is visceral feedback, positive or negative,
Mm-hmm.
from the actions that you take, and those become stronger when you have multiple instances loaded into sort of like a single event, right? So a natural 20 against a goblin feels pretty good, like okay, good. A natural 20 against your story arch nemesis as the final blow is why you scream at the table, right? In Dark Souls, it's the feedback of like, okay, I got through like a bunch of trash enemies or whatever, and then you fight this boss for 10 times in a row, and you're like, oh, fuck. But you can create an even stronger feedback by succeeding, getting your souls back before you die, all sorts of those. Like, I think it's about like building ways to create high loaded instances of feedback. I think that's what it is.
How do you do that? Now we got it.
How
I want the mechanic. I need it from you.
I think it's different from game to game. I don't think I could say like a one solid.
Well, make one. It's different from game to
I
game. Here's the thing.
I am not a man of general sweeps, okay?
But I'm not asking for I'm not saying this is the answer, but it is an answer, right? Like, so how can we, like, I want an example of what you mean by feedback because I get what it means in video games where we're coming from. It's those sound effects. It's whatever. I get what it maybe means in. I don't know what it means in tabletop RPGs, but I think knowing an example of it would like help because I think I agree with you. Like, I think you're on the right path here with something that would be really nice because like the non mechanical times when like you do something in RPG and everybody oohs and ahs, that feels good. That's great. We love that.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you sort of mechanize something like that feeling of the oohs and the ahs and the ooh and the
Uh,
ah.
well, I think uncertainty is a
Mm-hmm.
big piece of it, right? I think if you have a solved game, you can't really execute on
Yeah.
strong feedback because it's planned, right? Like there's no variables involved. You know what the outcome's going to be. It's not really like a surprise. So I think surprise, like the uncertainty mechanic, uh, is worth considering. And I think it's also about like building mechanics around playing the odds. It's gambling, right? Like if you're rolling dice, you're gambling for a result.
Uh-huh.
Um, and you know, what is more exciting than winning a bunch of money at one time?
let's
Like
go to the
in like
let's go to the
losing it all in 10
casino.
seconds or doubling it in 10. No, I'm not doing that.
New, new. Have
Uh,
you played this goal? All of your money that you give us, we're gonna gamble away at the nearest casino.
there's an interesting there's an interesting GDC talk called Making Games for Game Designers,
Mm.
and it's this guy that is doing a conversation about how he teaches game mechanics by making his class play. Like he has crafted some games like around very specific type mechanics. They don't have like other systems involved. It's like you're doing the one thing.
Mm.
And the last one he always does is probability and gambling. And he comes in the class and he gives everyone like fake money to bet with. It's like, okay, I want everyone to take 2d6, two six-sided dice, and whenever you get a 12, you win at your table and you can move on to the next table in the room. So you hear like a bunch of like kids just throwing dice at the table as fast as they can until someone gets a 12. And like, okay, that was sort of fun. And the thing he sees happens is that whenever he ups the ante for the game, the fun like increases. So that first time I was like, oh, that was pretty all right. He's like, okay, now here's a bunch of cookies. Everyone who rolls a 12 gets a cookie. There are only a certain amount of cookies. I'm like, okay, cool, cool, cool. So then they do it again. It's like the energy is just so much more. He's like, okay, here's a bunch of $1 bills. Everyone who, and like the teacher's also participating because he thinks it's important to like get the feedback of playing in the environment. And by that time, everyone's like, yes, this is the best game I've ever played. It's really interesting to see like how uncertainty can really add big feedback for people. There's another mechanic, like if you roll a 7 or something like that, you like have to skip your next roll or something, or you have to wait till your opponent rolls. I can't remember. But I think a universally satisfying mechanic is uncertainty, and building around uncertainty um, can be powerful.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, again, I think that you're definitely right because that's probably why mostly all RPGs, except for that's why Diceless is the exception, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because uncertainty rules, especially when it comes to telling a story um,
Mm-hmm.
in this weird collaborative way that we kind of stake our this whole hobby around, um, the hobby of playing the games. And yeah, I'm picking out some things from you. One, there's setting stakes because we're getting a mechanic out of this at the end.
Okay.
I don't care how long this show has to go. We're getting a nice concrete mechanic that would be fun. So one, you've got the setting the stakes, like making there be some result. So that's when you talked about the cake and the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
The cake and the dollar
Mm-hmm.
made it more fun for some reason. That whole time I had 2 dice in my hand. I was trying to roll a 12, didn't do it the whole time. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
heard the little
Nope.
clinking on the desk, but these 2 dice, you know how many 5 and 6s they came up with, or double five?
But rolling a
I, pro-
12 is hard.
I probably rolled like 20 times. No 12s. Um, so setting
Still rolling.
stakes. How how do we get something into this game, this made up game that doesn't exist, but we're making a mechanic for that? There's real stakes, and then the feedback. The feedback of how do we get something that has a sound effect, but we don't have sound effects because it's
Mm-hmm.
a tabletop game? How do we get the little blink? I can't remember what it sounds like in Destiny whenever you shoot the head, but I remember there is something that's like, ooh, I did it.
Ooh, I did it.
I did it. So those two are very important. And then we're adding, obviously, the uncertainty. So I think we could start with the easy way of you're rolling dice because it's a tabletop role playing game, and that's what we're expecting.
I think Ice Cold Brew also has mentioned something. Would making other players invested count towards that feedback? Like everyone is looking at abilities, trying to find a way to make their position more favorable. Uh, I caught like that's the synergy, and I think after talking about this with you for a little bit, I think a mechanic to move towards is party rolling, and it's something that like I've also been trying to do in Umbral Dive, which I think is interesting. Is that and Aegon Second Edition also sort of does this, but it does it in a competitive way. So it's not really like. I think when you do something in a competitive way, it isn't as visceral because you get one person who's the victor and you get the other 3 people who are like, ah, boo. You know what I mean? So it's like a clash of feedback. But I do think there's something interesting in that, like, what if you had player classes? Everyone rolls one type of dice, but at the same time, every time the party tries to do something in this game,
Okay. It's a
you
party,
all
very
must
party
roll a
based game.
dice. Party-based game.
Mm-hmm.
It is cooperative. It is not competitive.
Okay.
But everyone has different like abilities. So let's say that the wizard rolls some size of a dice. Let's make it fucking D12 because why not? Let's imagine that we can fuck up the whole conventions of what a wizard dice is.
Wizard Die is a D12.
It could also be that different spells or different actions or whatever cause different dice to be rolled, different environments. Maybe
so-
the environment gets a roll, right? Like the GM gets to make a roll as well with everyone.
All right. So things are
And
happening.
so
Different dice are being rolled.
all at the same time,
All at the
every
same
time an
time.
action is taken, everyone must roll.
Everybody's chucking dice.
Everybody's
Which
chucking
that
dice.
I think we're already on our way to something feeling good because everybody likes rolling dice. The easy
Yeah.
answer to this question, we could have escaped the conversation entirely, was just rolling dice, dude.
No, it's too easy. You've
It's
elicited the
universally
challenge.
fun.
My challenge fun has been triggered. Uh But I think everyone rolls, and I think everyone has like different things, right? So one player uh, says, when I match with someone else, this benefit happens.
Uh-huh.
Another player says, if the party rolls a straight, this thing happens.
Yeah.
So it's like sort of combining Yahtzee thoughts in a way.
Okay.
Um, and, you know, someone, you get a bonus for every even that's rolled on the table or something. Or, um, there's a lot of different vectors to like slice it, but I think manipulating the dice numbers, the pattern of dice, the maybe like the GM dice causes some like weird things to happen with everyone else's dice. Like, it's a D4, so like the D4 rolled, everyone's numbers have to change by 2 now, or something like that.
Ooh, yeah.
There's a lot of different
Ooh.
like ways to slice that pie, but I think a nice feedback thing is figuring out multiple player rolling mechanics that have synergy attached to them. And that's speaking to like a battle style game, but you could probably easily accomplish that like in story emotional types of
Uh-huh.
games as well. So imagining like your oh Cooper, don't do it.
Oh,
Watching a little
Mr.
DOS
Cooper.
hound. Now little Cooper, don't be barky. But you could do it in like you share the whoever rolled closest to you has an emotional resonance
Uh-huh.
with you or something
Okay.
like that, right? Or the person farthest from you feel like you just can't understand each other in this scene or
Yeah.
something. And you can do those same sorts of mechanics where it's like if everyone rolls an emotional straight, maybe there's like a series. Maybe the first person who rolled lowest starts the scene, and the person who rolled highest ends the scene, and the person that ends highest has to have like the largest climax of the scene or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's get concrete with it. Let's what are we doing? You said this there's wizards. Are we in a dungeon? Are we I want this mechanic. We're
I
getting
get
closer.
the mechanic
You're
is there.
looking at
It's
me.
party
No,
synergy
no, no.
roll.
That's the name of the mechanic. What's the damn mechanic? We're getting closer to
Everyone
it.
rolls a dice.
But what are they doing? Where's the feedback? Like what?
It depends on the game.
This is what? Do
Are
you,
we designing a game or are we designing a mechanic?
what's the difference?
What?
What's the difference between those two things?
I feel like a lone mechanic doesn't have like a rule set, right? Like you can roll a dice and nothing like stakes, right? So
Uh,
stakes, the setting or the play, the narrative that's happening,
that's
the
what I'm
fiction
established.
is the game.
That's what I just asked. I said, okay, we've got wizard. What are they doing? I'm setting the stakes so that we can get this real mechanic out there. Because everybody rolls dice. It's not enough. It's not enough.
Everyone rolls dice at the same time.
Uh huh. It rules. We're getting there. I want more.
I
So
want more.
we've got a
All
part.
right.
We've got a party. Everybody is invested in each other's success, and also their emotions are. You were talking about emotional resonance and stuff. They're somehow in play. Is this a very
Mhm.
specific game? Of like, are they in a dungeon, or are they trying to? Is this like what's happening? I'm trying to think of what's happening.
I'm about to whatever this becomes. I'm ripping it for Umbral Dive because it
Great.
sounds like everything I want and more. Uh,
Well, then we could say Umbral Dive, if that helps you
okay,
to get specific.
sure. Yes, it will help me get specific. Okay, here we go. So, let's take the high level dice pool sort
Yeah,
of situation with that Aegon has, right? This is where these mechanics are sort of like originating in my brain.
I
In
don't know.
Aegon Second Edition, every player, whenever you do a trial or a contest,
Uh-huh.
everyone must build a dice pool based on their name, their epithet, and the domain of the challenge. So, for instance, one example of the domain is arts and oration. So, if you're trying to craft something, make something, it's very like Greco sword and sandal inspired. Um, and everyone rolls, and then you tell how the contest was overcome or not at all based on the results of everyone's roles, starting with the lowest person. So it's like this story narrative building mechanic where the lowest person starts the scene, and the highest person, should they succeed, finishes the scene with a success, and they take the glory for that scene at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's like the original version of this. For Umbral Dive, I wanted to rip that for sure in like world exploration challenges, because one of the things I hate about D&D is when you go, um, okay, I'd like to do a perception check, but I'd like the person with the highest perception to make the perception check.
Why don't we all
Or
just look
like,
around? Let's just all look around.
yeah, we all just look around the
There's
room.
no
Like
consequences for
that'll
failure, so.
that's what I'm don't praise. But yeah, it's something I dislike about D&D, where everyone starts hunting for highest stat and makes that person do the roll. And whenever group checks are involved, they make an assumption that but then the person who has the highest roll, or the highest stat, may have a low roll, and then it's like the barbarian with an 8 wisdom notices the gleaming treasure that the cleric couldn't, which is
And I don't mention
mind-blowing
it.
to me.
I keep it secret.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. So that's what that's from. I wanted to do something where everyone rolls and accomplishes the task together. So then the pressure off of that is, how do you make that have consequences? Well, then it's a matter of time and risk. So having everyone engage on a single task and making a bunch of rolls means that you're probably going to succeed at the task, but it's going to take a lot of your time and resources because you're devoting all of your attentions to that task. If you wanted to split the party or do like a flanking thing or whatever, you're still able to engage in the task, but regardless of what the skill is called for, but now you're lowering your odds because you have not enough party members or something like that, which is fine if you're trying to manage like, we have to get out of here as fast as possible, or we have to rescue them as fast as possible, or we have to complete this objective. As long as like the stake is time, I think that you can execute a risk reward of like, it's slower and safer to everyone roll. It's riskier and faster if people roll separately in different locations or under different tests or something. So that's one thing. The second thing is the synergy part of, I don't know, like morale style stuff, right? Or rallying or whatever, where like you could say a guardian, a warrior, a leader style character, a bard or something, gives like a speech, and maybe their numbers can, like, maybe they can take one of their dice and give it to someone else, like their lowest dice roll, they give it to someone else, and maybe the bard still succeeds in that task or something, and the other person also succeeds and adds to the success pool or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to like slice that up again, but I think that the stake is time. Like whatever this mechanic is attached to, for me, I think it's important that the risk reward is, why is everyone rolling with a higher success chance important? And then opposite, why is it still important if individuals roll separately? Because then you're always rolling together. You're always almost like, I think it's less fun if you did just everyone rolls, but you get like higher and higher difficulty numbers. Like this one requires a 30. And like I want, like you, me as the GM, I want that to be hard because there's 4 of you rolling, and it's like, I don't find that engaging. I don't think that's fun.
Yeah.
So I think if the game decides what the difficulty is, and then you decide like, okay, everyone does this, or we all have to go do separate things, I think it's more interesting for a party style role mechanic.
So if we're talking about time versus difficulty, is it something where everybody's rolling? Let's say everybody's involved. Everybody rolls their dice, and like then each player has different things that let them modify other people's dice, so you can hit that target number. But every time somebody uses one of those, it like adds an increment of time, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we've all rolled. We need exactly a 30. Looking around, oh my god, I just imagine adding all of the dice everybody rolled, and maybe it's not. Maybe
No,
it's
it
not
has it's
feeling good.
individual stuff. Like
Okay.
uh you might say like this test requires 2 successes. Maybe the game like it's the rule of 4 for slayers, right? Where like everyone needs to roll a 12, like in
Yeah.
combination with their dice pool. So like
Okay.
anyone who rolls above a 12 succeeds. You need 2 successes to pass on. 4 people rolling is and you would make this
Okay.
modular for number of players, obviously, as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So each player keeps track of their own personal sum. That feels way better already. You've improved it from what I was thinking it was in my head.
Yeah, no, no, no. I do not want
Well,
like
what are
a
we at
table of
now?
4 to add 20 dice together.
What does that put us at? We gotta re-add completely.
Yeah.
But no,
Christ.
it's like, oh shit, I'm at 11. Can anybody bump one of my dice up by one, and then I'm
Yeah.
one of our successes? Who's got it? That does feel better. But every time somebody does something like that, it adds a time. But then if you're doing a check individually in this, can you still adjust your dice, or
Probably it
do you just
depends. It
take your
depends on
lumps?
how it might be take your lumps, but it might also be like you might have personal and team mechanics. There's
Uh huh.
also a difference of like proactive mechanic and reactive mechanic where you could do some balancing in that where like the speech character is a proactive thing. Like before everyone rolls, you make a speech and then you have to
Yeah.
give your lowest dice or your highest dice or whatever the trade-off is. But then there's also reactive mechanics that maybe aren't like consequenced by time.
Hmm.
They could be consequenced by stress or a resource. Like it's sort of like, ooh, I have to quickly spend magic to help this person like overcome this trial or something. Whereas
Mm.
the proactive is like you take time to like cast a ritual or something like that, which is less resource intensive. So that's another way to sort of frame the mechanics that you have there,
All right, let's
like
pull
the
this.
team mechanics.
I want to pull this back out of Humble Dive because putting it in
Let's
Humble
go there.
Dive is allowing you to go back to not doing the specific, and I want the specific mechanic, which
I don't
means
know what you're asking of me. I don't know.
I know. So this is the funny thing, and we're gonna have to do a part 2 episode of this because what I'm doing and asking of you is asking you to use my process for game
Uh
design.
huh.
And so
Uh
we're gonna
huh.
have to do a future one where you bully me into doing your process and watch me struggle, because this time we're watching you struggle with my process because they're so different and it's really funny to see. Um, so we're pulling it out, right? We're
Uh
we're in a conceptual bubble, right?
huh. Yep, I'm there.
We'll
My eyes are
say that
closed.
they're in it. Maybe they're in a battle. This is combat. Fuck it.
Sure.
This is the
This
easiest
is a
thing.
game that has combat.
We've got 4 players. They're engaged
Yep.
in combat against,
Yep.
the DM and the
Yes.
DM's crew.
There are 5 players.
Come on, why are you making it more complicated? Oh, you're calling the
You put me
DM
in the
the.
bubble. My eyes are closed.
You're calling the DM the 5th player.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Um, so everybody, we're only doing D6. Adding extra dice, I think, would make extra die types is how you improve upon this and make it cooler and
Maybe.
add design space. But I've got a pile of d6 in my hand, and so that's what
Uh
I'm
huh.
gonna roll.
Uh
And we'll
huh.
actually let's say the GM has a d12, so everybody's gonna
Sure.
roll. Let's
Yep.
see. We've got 4 players. Um, 2 of them have 3 dice. 2 of them have 2 dice because of their class, and because I only have 10 dice at my desk. The GM's gonna
Uh
roll. The GM rolled an 11. That's not looking good for the players.
You're saying that decides the target number?
I don't know what it decides, but
Sure.
yeah. Or
That's what Aegon
let's
does, the Strife player, which is the GM for the game. They roll a dice pool, and the single highest result plus the Strife level of the island
mhm.
decides the target number. So, for instance, if you're facing the giant basilisk and they roll D10 and 8 plus 5 is 13, it means the target number for their rolls are 13.
Okay. So what are we doing? What are we doing here? I've got everybody's rolls. What do they want to do?
Yep.
The GM rolled an 11. One player
Yep.
has a 10. One player has a 9. Then we've got a 7 and an 8. We've got 70,
Let's
9,
do
10,
let's
11.
do the let's do the
10 and 11.
Brachus fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um let's say this is to God, what could this be? dodge a sniper shot,
Win the fight.
maybe, or maybe the results determine the targeting, right? So maybe like brackets can sort of hit you from anywhere, and maybe in this specific instance, the lowest roll from the target number gets like a critical hit, and then maybe you can sort of like use reactive abilities or proactive. Maybe like in this instance, there is a Titan who says, I put up my shield in front of my party, right? So we start with that proactive mechanic, and maybe that says, everyone gets like a D4 to their roll or some bullshit like that. You don't have to find D4 if you don't have them next to you, but I'm imagining something like, are you opening a drawer to pick out D4? No. Okay,
It was a bit.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm imagining based on what we've talked about so far.
Okay.
So this target roll is to avoid the boss mechanic.
Okay, and the target roll is it 11 or is it something else?
Let's call it. You're rolling 3d6, so the average number on that is going to be 8.
Two players have 3, 2 players have 2.
Sure, but the average on the 3 is going to be 8, the 2 is going to be 7. So let's just call it 11 for now, because it seems pretty impossible if it's any higher.
Wouldn't it be 8? Are you sure about that?
On 3d6, yes, the average is 8. The middle average is 8.
I'm just gonna let it go because I'm not convinced.
I checked it. I went to any dice, dude.
Shouldn't it be?
I've got the math.
11?
No, I found out it's like, well, for three it should be wait.
Shouldn't be 11 because each die is gonna. It should be 11 and a half because each die adds 3.5, or each die adds 3. It should be 9. Fuck.
But that's not the.
Wait.
I don't think that's the same as the probability because it's
you're
one.
Right.
Yeah, it's 8. I definitely know that it's 8 from any dice.
No, each die adds 3.5. It should be 11.
Because you add the lowest plus the highest result, and then add 1, and that's true of almost any dice.
I don't. But
because for 3d12 it's 14.
I think it should. I think each die adds. Half of.
Let's continue with the mechanic. Let's just keep going with what we were doing.
All right. Well, I think the average is 3.5 plus 3.5 plus 3.5, which is 10.5. Anyway,
that's what Jimmy said. Jimmy agrees with you. I could be wrong.
This might be a mean versus mode. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're trying to hit 11 because that's what the GM rolled. Or
yep.
Yeah.
We're trying to hit 11. That's what the GM rolled.
Okay. And so somebody's coming out with a shield. What are they doing with the shield? They're handing off one of their dice?
They can give their highest dice to another player. Great. Any other player that is behind the shield. If there was a tactical map, they could only do this with people who are behind the shield. They could not do this with any player that is outside of the shield.
All right, but in this case, because we're trying to do it as simple as possible, everybody's behind the shield. They handed it off, so now the shield person has only rolled a 4 because they've just handed off their biggest die to somebody who now has an 11. So somebody has exactly an 11. I assume they can go next. But what is the time ticking? Because we said that there's a time stake here. So player just did an action.
Brackus is going to get.
Okay.
So Brackus is going to get to make another shot because no one's moving to collect the solar charge to put it in the furnace, right? To get him off the tower.
Of course.
So someone has to split off at some point and take on a different test.
Okay. Maybe that's our elusive 5th player. They're somewhere doing this.
Maybe not. Oh, well, you mean like if we were to retcon that example, sure. But maybe then this next time it's like, okay, I'm like 2 of us are going to go. Hopefully we have some cover. The other 2 of us will try to draw fire and stay behind the barrier, right? So then you would roll maybe like 2 separate tests of like getting to the solar charge. And it could be like a clock situation in this like loose version where, you know how you like drop a clock whenever something narrative happens, like, oh, now, the boss, the mafia boss or whatever is shown up. So
We're here.
I'm gonna add a clock for they find you or whatever. So you could probably do that for tests and just have like a GM rolled number, and then you could say now there are two tests: getting to the solar charge and drawing focus
Mm-hmm.
uh, from Brachus. And so you could do those tests.
All right,
You could
solar
do the
charge is a D10 on
travel.
the side. Ooh, it's a 10.
Say again.
I
Huh?
said the solar charge is a D10, so we'll say that Brachus shooting is currently this D12, which is set to 11.
Sure. Yeah, an
And then
unchanging
the charge is a
modifier.
10 because I rolled a 10 on a
Okay.
D10. So we'll say it's Brachus's turn then. Maybe it's like for every player action, the GM takes an action. That's the because we don't want to be drawing clocks. Let's keep it as simple as we can. So Brachus here with this 11 is just going to take a shot, and has to target the player with the shield. And we'll say, fuck it. Let's keep it super simple. So the player with the shield currently has 2 dice on the table, and it's 2 twos. So let's say Brachus has to drop its number down by 2 to get rid of one of those 2s. And so that's done.
Sure.
And now it's a player turn. And now Brachus's target number is 9. So do we need to be exact on our numbers?
That just changes the probability. What do you mean by exact? Do you mean
Like,
like they have to hit 9 or go
Yeah,
9 and
does a
above?
player have to hit exactly a 9 or go above?
Just depends on how hard you want it to be.
No, it doesn't depend. I'm asking in this example. It does depend, but like, what's the decision being made for this example?
I would say at this point in favor of the players, so meet or beat.
Meter beat? Okay. So now this player that previously was handed a 4 is still at 11. Maybe it is beat. And so now this player with this 11 can just drop. So 11 versus 9 can drop the GM down to 7. And now it's the GM's turn again.
So what if then this version is one where it's an Oracle style sort of thing?
Yeah.
So it's like an engagement roll, right? In Blades in the Dark, or it's like I don't know of another game that could potentially do a Oracle roll, but I know that Ironsworn has an option to Oracle roll. But what I mean by this is that before you do anything, once you say this is an encounter and it starts, everyone rolls dice. The numbers you don't re-roll them. But you can do dice manipulation from that point forward, so you can like use them as counters instead.
Yeah.
And you can like use your dice to lower the GM's dice or the different test dice. So then also that way, because we're using Destiny 2 as an example, you could have a bunch of adds of different ranks. So maybe the boss is a D12. And maybe if this is like a shaped encounter, like it's an adventure or a scenario, you just set that dice. Like the D12 is set to a 12 or whatever. And then you roll a bunch of like little dice, like D4s and D6s. And all those dice are different like manipulations on the battlefield. And then you can use your own player dice to take out those dice. They can manipulate your dice or lower your numbers, something to that effect.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because it's more of just the difference, and it cracks me up every time. Which is because you're still like you're very top down, and I like that a lot. Because you're like you like to narrow the possibility space of what the mechanics could be until only one remains. Is what it feels like. Is that
I destroy them all.
Yeah, it's like, it could be any of these, and it depends on all of these factors. Whereas I just like to pick a thing and like see how it feels, and then, so like, you start up. It feels like you start up at the top of the possibility space. Like, let's consider all of the factors. All right, we're narrowing out these ones, so now we're left with these, and like keep drilling down deeper. Whereas I just like to go to the bottom level of where the mechanics are, see how it feels, and then like jump to neighboring possibility spaces.
Yeah,
until I get the right one.
I let the fiction and the game genre decide my mechanics. I think is an accurate way. Like you saying that I work from the top down is accurate because I think about how do I want a firefight to feel.
Yeah.
I don't do the opposite where like, oh, all these dice I rolled feels like a firefight. Like that's the
Yeah.
difference of the sentence.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
trying to think about what does a sword fight feel like? What does a firefight feel like? What does telling someone you're sorry feel like? And then
uh,
can we get that emulated by the mechanics?
right. I do that. Well, the thing is, I do that too, but I just don't go. I don't start all the way at the top.
Yeah.
I just like pick a mechanic and see how well it feels like that.
Oh, I definitely reached the bottom. You know how many times I've thrown away shit for Umbral Dive.
I mean, you
I'm
go
like, what
on,
does a combat feel like?
you go on journeys to the bottom, and then if you don't like it, head back up.
Yeah.
Whereas I
Yep.
kind of warp through the walls at the bottom, stay at the bottom at all times, because it's more
You're
fun
very
down there for me.
lateral in your
Yeah,
design.
it's an interesting difference anyway. Because every question, it's like, well, it depends on all 14 of these factors, and we got to think about all of them right now.
Yep.
And you're not
That's how
wrong,
my brain works.
right? Yeah, it's just fun. Whereas I'm like, yeah, you got to think about all this, but like, why not instead I try a thing and then compare it to those things that you want to think about ahead of time. Like, give it a report card as opposed to, I don't know. It's just interesting. Everybody does things differently. What's up with that?
Yeah. What's up with that?
What's going on with that?
Hey, let me know in chat or in any of the podcast review comments. What sort of designer are you? Are you a top down or are you a bottom up? You know what I'm saying? Or do you
Yeah,
switch? Wink.
wink. It's the top of the hour. Let me ride
Yeah.
this combat out in the way that I think it works. So, so now it's the GM's turn because the player just did a thing. I think the GM is going to draw energy from the tower. So there's that tower that the players need to destroy, right?
Uh-huh.
And we're probably deviating from Destiny here, but who gives a shit?
Sure.
So
Sure.
that the tower's currently a 10, and the GM's happy with that. So the GM's going to drop that down by 3. So that's going to be at a 7 now, which means the main die is going to be back up at 10.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what happened? So the player shot with an 11. Do they lose a die, or do they just drop something? Maybe they have to drop 2 total.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to drop this to a 3 and this to a 3. Okay, so now the board looks like we've got the GM with a 10 on the main thing, a 7 on the tower. We've got the shield, currently 1 die remaining at a 2. It's looking dire for that player. So let's say this player over here who has currently, can't do math, a 9, is going to spend their 2 to use their special power that lets them allow the table as a whole to roll 2 extra dice and slot them in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easy. They rolled a 6 and a 1. The shield's going to take the 6. The other player's going to take that. GM goes. Tries to shoot. Has to shoot through this 6. Loses 6 health. Boom. We're going to finish this up. This other player spends a 6. Kills that. The tower's still standing. Who gives a shit? Let's go. You don't know what just happened, but I do because I was watching the dice. That could be good.
Very good
That sort of dice
podcast.
play kind of feels all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we did.
I think a lot about using just dice as enemies and keeping the numbers low, and then you have to. I think one of the crucial bits as we finish this up is to think about if there is re-rolling, when does it happen? How is it triggered? Because you made a mechanic where like they spend their 2, right? Which means they remove their 2 from their total, which affects how they accomplish tests and affect. It's kind of like a you're like grinding away at each other's results on the table, and then how do you refresh certain, because that's sort of like a death spiral situation, right?
Yeah.
Which could also be the time factor, right? You have to complete this encounter before you lose all your dice. That's one way to swing it.
Right. And
But
that's
the
sort
other
of
one is
why
like,
that's why I did the ability where one of the players spent one of their dice to roll that many dice and re-add to the player's reserves to try to like. So that might be like a healer.
yeah. But they don't get that dice or something. I don't know. But it's that's one way is there's the death spiral way. And then there's also like the timed way of like how many recharges do you get until like a new phase is triggered or like a more powerful ability, like you're stalling, right? How like if you're thinking about re-rolling but preventing stalling, like in D&D can happen. You could, if you have enough spell slots, you could run an encounter for fucking 4 days. I don't know.
Mhm.
You could go for forever. But yeah, I think that's something you would look at is like how is the time stake involved here, and is it a grind away to the death, or is it a grind away and which one of you breaks first is sort of like what that question is for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Why don't we call it there?
Yeah,
Leave the rest of that as an exercise to the reader or to you if you were doing Umbral Dive thinking throughout this.
it's going in.
Yeah. I think that's the end of our show. This has
Mm-hmm.
been the Have You Played This podcast, brought to you in front of a live studio audience at who all live at haveyouplayedthis.com. Go check it out. Throw us a couple of bucks if you're into that sort of thing. And by that sort of thing, I mean this sort of thing, because it helps keep us doing it.
Yeah.
One day we'll figure out tiers and like fun rewards and whatever the fuck else, and really get this ball rolling. But until then, just toss it because you care about us. I'm Adam Bell. You can find me on Twitter at AdamEBell. Get the show at Played This. Get my games at adamebell.games. And
I've been Jeremy Gage. You can find me at JeremyGage5 over on Twitter. You can listen to the Draw Your Dice podcast. You can follow Umbral Dive updates over on the HYPT Discord. So come hang out with other designers and us, stars of the show, at your leisure. Watch me play some Destiny 2 every once in a while. Get access to Let's Plays.
yeah, that's the exclusive reward. So
It's true.
Yeah. We'll talk to you next week, probably. Bye.